my job first.
No.
I'd like to call Public Health and Safety Judicial Committee to order. Roll call, please.
You got the wrong one. Oh, go ahead.
Alderman Shockey. Alderman Winger. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Cadella.
Here.
Alderman Police. Alderman Coles.
Here.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Lewitton.
Here.
I need a motion to approve the minutes, December 10th, 2009.
I'll make a motion.
Second. On favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. At this time, I'll turn over to Police Chief Frank Benowitz.
Alderman, thank you. Tonight, I'd just like to introduce Sergeant Mike Rivas on my left here. He's been helping preparing our budget for the upcoming year, and I wanted him to kind of firsthand experience part of the process. Tonight before you, you have a request with regards to vehicle replacement. Usually prior to the start of the budget year, we come to you every year for the replacement of vehicles so that we can take advantage of a state purchasing process. With regards to this year, we're looking to replace 4 vehicles. Of those 4 vehicles, 2 are Crown Vics and 2 would be Ford Tauruses. We would be replacing a 2005 Crown Vic with 72,000 miles on it, which is currently in the detective fleet. We would also be replacing a 2003 Gray Taurus with 64,000 miles on it, and then 2 squad cars that are in the patrol fleet, having 70 and 75,000 miles, which would be car 402 and 403. This entire transaction would cost $83,216, of which $80,000 would be offset by fees which have been collected from traffic fees. That would leave a liability to the general fund, which would be coming out of the squad car replacement program, motor vehicles in the general fund to the tune of $3,216. This is less than what we spent last year. Last year, with our offset, we spent $8,000, so we are actually going down $5,000 from what we spent last year. We're looking for your permission to go forward, not to accept delivery of these vehicles until after May 1st. However, to place the orders so that we can take advantage of not only pricing, but the specifications which are needed through the state vendor. We would be dealing with 2 separate vendors here. One would be Landmark Ford in Springfield, Illinois, which is the vendor for police cars in the state of Illinois through the purchase program through the state. The second one would be a dealership, which is through the Northwest Mayors and Managers Consortium, and that would be to lock in a price on the Ford Tauruses, which are replacement vehicles. This is once again, we would be permitting 2 vehicles, the 2005 white Crown Vic and the 2003, to be released for any other purpose within the city and/or to be auctioned off.
I make the motion to approve the squad cars.
I'll second it.
Questions?
In the recent snowstorm that we had, as it was coming up before time, I had an opportunity to just chat with some of the police officers over a cup of coffee and ask them how they respond. And they say, well, when it gets really bad, we have the people come into the station. And he said, we wouldn't really want to go out there because our cars skid out there. They're not good on the snow. Are we getting cars that are going to be good operating vehicles in winter weather? Because it seems like we don't have them now, from judging from people who use them.
I have not heard that problem or that input from any of our patrol officers. Unfortunately, they haven't come to me, so I am unaware of that.
Well, I'm talking about the Crown Vics. Those would be the police cars that would be out there. Can they be? Is there a better car for traction for winter, or can they be upgraded to be more traction heavy?
Keep in mind that if we do have weather that is to the point where it's presenting a problem, we do have chains that are available that can be placed on the vehicle.
Snow chains?
Yes.
I thought they were illegal in Illinois.
No, they're not.
Because when I was a kid, we used to put them on our cars in the middle of winter, and then we were told we couldn't do them anymore.
Okay.
The o-
Alderman Coase?
the only thing that's illegal is studded snow tires.
Yeah, that's what we used
That's
to
the
use.
only thing that's illegal. Chains are legal in the state of Illinois. They are legal. Chains are.
Chains.
Yeah, and wrap-on chains. You know, the little ones with the straps, you can get them too. But the only thing that's illegal is studded snow tires.
Alderman, I don't think that's a big issue.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I got a motion second. Since it's money, I guess I gotta take a roll call. Roll call? Oh,
Alderman Eugene Wesley,
Yes.
Alderman Cadella,
Yes.
Alderman Coles,
Yes,
Alderman Roy Wesley,
Yes.
Alderman Lewitton.
Yes.
Items B, consider at future meetings is liquor license, creating S patio. Motion for adjournment.
second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do you want to go next or? Let's see.
No, let's do, because it's CIP. Turn it off.
He's gone. Gotta leave.
Call the Public Works meeting in order. Make the minute, take a note that the same people are present. Christine Winger has joined us. I need a motion to approve the minutes, January 28th, 2010. So moved. Do I have a second? Second. Questions, changes? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is a discussion on 353 through 359 North Cedar. Drainage problem, as you know, we did some studies that you received in your package. I believe the firm URS Corp., is that here, are you this one? Okay. We have the engineer person that did the studies to answer any questions or tell us about his study. So we'll turn it over to Dave Graff, and then we'll take it from there.
Just to give a brief overview of this drainage problem, this is at 353, 356 North Cedar, and it's basically characterized by a lot of overflows in the backyard that kind of find themselves trapped, not able to make it out to the front, causes flooding problems in those yards and encroaches to the buildings on either side. I guess just to briefly summarize, two causes of the problem. One, stormwater, also a sanitary sewer in the back, surcharges, and that contributes to it. In your report, there were a few alternatives given for correcting the problem. Jim Push is here from URS Corporation, who did the study, and he'd be happy to answer any questions you have on it.
Anyone have any questions on that? Almost a dollar.
Dave, do you know, or does anybody in here know, is that a neighborhood that originally would have had swales in the rear easement, if there even is a rear easement? I know parts of Ward 2, parts of Ward 1 were designed with rear swales, and some of them exist and some of them don't anymore. Is this one of them? And next question that's going to tie into, how do we think this problem came to be? Because I don't think it existed forever.
Well, this particular location, it's rear to front drainage, so the property line of the backyards is actually higher than the houses, and it's supposed to drain around either side of the house like a horseshoe pattern. One of the problems here is the one home was built, I think, later than the others. As I understand it, it was a vacant lot for a longer period of time, and that was kind of the drainage channel for that whole neighborhood. When the house got built, it squeezed those overflows to either side of the house, and that puts us to the situation we are today. Did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, that's pretty much, that sums it up pretty well. And what we did find is that the house itself is blocking the water from coming around.
But, go ahead, Mr. Goodell.
I just want to follow up. I mean, I'm going to go just a tiny little bit off subject here, but just kind of remind the council members that sometimes when a lot's been empty for 50 years, there's a reason. And, you know, to say that somebody has a right to sell it and build on it because it's a legal conforming property is not always the right answer. Moving forward, we need to identify if there's any empty lots left in town and why they might be. I have one next to me, to be honest with you, that was empty until 1989, and now my foundation is cracking because they shoehorned a house into there, so, and there's water problems. Okay, that's it, thank you.
My question that I'm going to have here is, if we approve a house on that site, we should know that the drainage is not going to affect or make a change on that drainage if the lot, and I kind of agree with John that we should, but you can't hold someone that owns a lot that he can't sell his lot. No, he owns the property, he can do what he wants with it, as far as I'm concerned. But it's our responsibility as a city council and our engineer firm to make sure we correct the drainage problem before the house is built. So my question here is, if we knew about the house being built, and I'm not criticizing the builder that they built the house, because I'm sure they submitted all the plans and everything else, and we reviewed them. Why did we not catch that it would find a problem down the line here?
Well, I don't know the circumstances of this particular lot, because it was long before my time. I know it's pretty common where the engineering concerns and the zoning concerns kind of meet head-on, because, you know, according to the zoning regulations, they're allowed to build a house of a certain size with a certain setback, and sometimes engineering concerns dictate something bigger to put the flow through there. So they maybe had to compromise with that. I think it's also possible that maybe it wasn't obvious to anyone at the time that this is where the overflows had gone. If there had been a number of years of drought, possibly in the years preceding it being built, maybe no one had seen the flood go through there. I don't know. And then there's also the question of the sanitary sewer contributing to it, that maybe that wasn't a problem then. Maybe that, you know, sewer became more leaky and started surcharging. So those are all possibilities. And I don't know, Jim, if you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, like Dave said, that this problem really predates any of us here. And, you know, unfortunately, we're just dealing with what we see now. The sanitary sewer surcharging, it is pumping some effluent out into the backyards. That is one of the problems that needs to be addressed. The stormwater, however, is coming from this entire block down to this center part of the block, and it's just coming out around the houses. And the houses are just a narrow, small gap. It could have been a very easy problem to miss as they were looking at the site, selling the site, building a house on it. However, they do know that as they were closing on the house, there was a request to kind of build a trench to get the water out to the front. So someone knew it right at the very end, just about after the house was built. That's all that we really know about it.
Okay,
So-
I'll ask, Joe Coles.
All
On the
right.
codes.
You, according to, I read your engineering report, and the one that you recommend is 2B. Would that solve the problem, 2B? Would that solve problems on both of the houses, or just on one?
Is this, that would solve the problem. The alternates that we gave would solve problems for both houses.
For both houses?
Yes. We weren't looking at pushing water from one house to the next. We were looking at more of a regional solution to fix the flooding problem through the backyards of these two houses, plus the others surrounding them.
According to the diagram here, most of the piping would be on 359 instead of 353, according to the way it's laid out.
Yes, this was just one of the alternates of where the pipes might come through.
Yeah.
we were just trying to follow the property lines. The one pipe coming across the middle of the backyard on 359 was just to get to the other low spot at the other corner of the backyard with the shortest distance.
Yeah, all right, okay, that's what I figured when I looked at the diagrams.
If I can just add one more thing to that.
In order to do this, you'd have to get permission from both landowners, and then, of course, I don't know if we do work on, they'd have to have it privately done, shouldn't they, or no?
Well, we would need easements. There are not currently
Yeah.
easements, so if we were to do it, we would need to acquire easements. Otherwise, right, we could not go
You
into their
could not do
property.
it, yeah.
And I did want to mention the alternate 2B, which I think we put in our recommendation of if we're going to do something out there, that's staff's recommendation, but that's really, as I'm sure you've seen, the most expensive option and kind of covers the most ground in terms of what it's doing. There are less expensive alternatives that could be done and are also effective, and that basically would have one storm sewer line instead of two. So we don't want you to feel like it's doing alternate 2B or doing nothing. There are those other alternates. in
Well, I
between
know
could be
that,
done.
but that's the one that I looked at that looked the best for, I'm not an engineer either. I'm just an ordinary guy. That's the one I thought looked the best. All right, thank you.
What is the age of the second house that was built, approximately?
The age of the 353 or 359?
Whichever one was built second on this lot that we're talking about.
Well, actually,
10 years.
At that time, we had a procedure, maybe Mr. Forrest should address this issue rather than yourself. There was procedures in place that you had to identify the drainage at the time you got the building permit on that lot and all the surrounding lots. Number one, did the engineers review the file? And Mr. Forrest, is that a correct statement of procedures that were in place 10 years ago and what happened, I guess?
Yes, correct, Mr. Mayor. At that time, we were using the consulting firm of Bennis and Associates, and one of the prerequisites in our building code is that someone would have had to submit a topographical survey showing the existing elevations, survey with the building spotted on it, and then the proposed finished elevations that showed all the drainage.
And so a follow-up to that, as your engineering review of this, did you review the old records to see if what is built on site conforms to the plans and the building permit that was issued? Either department, either Mr. Forrest or the engineers?
No, we didn't have the records from back then to review.
I would think that would be kind of an important
Wait a
piece of
minute,
information.
I'll do a follow-up with that. John, answer this question. Isn't it before, they do have full occupancy to that house, right?
The houses on Cedar Street?
Yeah.
I believe they do, yes.
Okay, so isn't it that before they could get their full waiver to move in or whatever, that the drainage must be met to our qualification and be looked at?
Correct. Well, what happens as part of the permitting
Well, that's why I'm
process is, prior to issuing the final occupancy certificate, they have to provide us with an as-built survey that shows the drainage, and that would typically be inspected, by the engineer.
By our engineer.
Correct.
So Mayor, they did do that.
But I guess the thrust of my question is what on site today built according to the plans, what exists today?
Yeah, if the consulting engineers here have not had the opportunity to do that, I'm sure we could find that file and they could take a look at it and then be able to cross-reference what was approved at the time and what might be in existence today.
Okay. Mr., go ahead, John.
A couple of things. First, Dave, you said something that partially makes sense and partially angers me, and it's not your fault. We may have been in the middle of an extended drought, and it would not be easy to recognize a problem. And I can understand that a staff member who's not out there shooting his own grades might not be able to see water when water is not there. I argue that Bennis and Associates, the engineer that city was using at the time, that I'm very grateful we're no longer using, shoots grades, was supposed to review drainage issues. Whether or not it hasn't rained for 100 years, they're still supposed to be able to identify drainage patterns, in my opinion. So I argue that I'm concerned that there's a liability issue, but if it's 10 years old, we may have gone well past that point. Second, to pick up on something that the mayor is asking, The brick house in this photograph looks to be a lot closer than 5 feet to the lot line. And I thought that on a 50-foot lot in R4, we need to be 10% or 5 feet, whichever is greater. And maybe John Forrest can refresh my memory, see if I'm right or wrong, without a variance, in which case I ask, was there a variance on this property?
I don't recall, I don't believe there was a variance, and you're correct. If it was a 50-foot lot, you would have to have a 5-foot sideline. If it was a 48-foot non-conforming lot, which there are some of those on the north side of town, you would still have to be 5 feet from the property line. I'm trying to find my photo of the house right now.
Yeah, I'm, maybe it's deceiving, but it looks like if this 3-foot fence fell over, it would almost touch the house, and that leads me to believe that it's not 5 feet.
I think it's a little bit of parallax in the photo. It's at least 4 feet. I didn't measure it, check that part of it myself, but it is at least 4 feet there.
I think it's right around
It's, so it's somewhere in the right ballpark, and we don't know that the fence is on the right-of-way line either. That could be off a little bit too. But I think what you're seeing is a lot of parallax from the photo.
Okay, I'm asking these questions just to try to find, it's 10 years old, but is there some liability issue? Who's at fault, and how do we figure out how to move forward and where the money's going to come from to deal with this? So if it was a variance, that would be a council issue. If this is an engineering problem, that's the engineer's fault. But are we beyond the statute of limitations?
Any other concerns from Mayor Johnson?
Well, just looking at your drawing, if it is to scale, one of the houses seems to be much clearer, closer to the lot line than the other. And the rule would be the same for both side yards.
It does look like 353 has a bigger setback than 359.
Yeah.
Which goes back to my point, I think we have to look at the old file and see what's there and have the engineers review that.
Go ahead. Christine Winger.
Couple things, and maybe I'm missing it, although maybe it's embedded in the study, but I would say the top priority is to fix the sanitary overflow. And it looks like it's going to be suggested to be added into the overall study and work, but I would say let's do it now. What is the cost, hypothetically, if we were to focus solely on the sanitary, fixing that?
Well, I would mention, first of all, we did recently put in a backflow preventer at 359. So that would eliminate the sewage, backing up through the floor drains into the house. That doesn't help out with
Right.
with the raw sewage coming out of the manhole and just joining the stormwater and contributing to the problem. We do have money budgeted to do sanitary sewer evaluation studies in town. I think we talked about one on Forest View at the last committee meeting, and I think was identified as probably the most critical spot in town. I would think this one would be right up there. I would probably, refer to John Kramer if he wanted to add anything, if he knows anything about maybe scheduling this one.
I think we're going to need to look at, when we start the citywide INI study, we're going to have to, in our RFQ process, prioritize areas of town. Obviously, this being high on that priority scale, several other areas of town that have experienced problems besides the Forest View area that's going to be on its own pilot area. And once we get those priorities set, we can evaluate those. Keep in mind that the reason why this sanitary sewer surcharges is because that rainwater fills that rear yard easement, causes the sanitary sewer to fill up, surcharge, and that's, again, part of it. This is all commingled into one problem. Can't kind of take the cart before the horse in some respects, unless I'm talking out of context.
So there's no way to fix the discharge from the drain before anything else?
Well,
Is that what you're
the
talking
two problems really go hand in hand. I mean, they're both caused by stormwater, and to really fix it, you'd have to attack it on both fronts, both by putting in additional drains during the stormwater and by tightening up the sanitary sewer and letting that flow at its best efficiency and not, overflow onto the ground.
Okay, so we can't fix the sewage first,
Right, we can't
the
just
sanitary.
fix one of them without the other.
Okay, thank you.
I'll look it out.
Is there a possibility of a temporary fix on the sanitary sewer by raising a collar and getting the manhole out of the elevation of floodwater? So we can get to that immediately?
I think temporarily we have curbed the issue at 359. That was the only residence that experienced any sanitary sewer overflow in the home itself. We can look at putting a ring or sealing the structure that's in the rear yard of 359 on that easement and look to make an additional temporary fix. Aesthetically, I don't think it would look absolutely perfect, but we could do something to stop that stormwater from flowing in mass. I think we'll still have some issue if there's that much groundwater in that area. I think we're probably still getting some seepage from that stormwater sitting there as well.
John Forrest first.
John Force. Mr. Force.
Thank you. In looking at this photo, as part of the research on this project, I would like to check into two things. Number one, I would like to see if when these homes were built, if Cedar Street had ditches and did not have curbs, and now it has curbs and storm sewers in the front. We've run into this issue in several neighborhoods where after we improve the streets and put the curbs and gutters in, the drainage changes. The other thing I would like to check in looking at this, if there are dedicated drainage ways down side property lines, and properties are designed that way. Typically, we would not issue a permit for sidewalks or other obstructions in that drainage way. And in looking at the sidewalk, I think we need to go back and check the records and see if there were permits issued for the sidewalk, because it appears that that could be impacting the drainage and restricting the flow of water through as well.
Okay. I do have a couple people that did come out tonight that affected this, and I did give them, they could speak tonight, or else they're going to be back here tomorrow, so I'd rather hear their opinion for our staff could go ahead and look at it. Hang on, Mr. Lewitton.
Thank you, Alderman Wesley. Staff, I don't know who wants to answer this question, but you said part of the resolution of the problem is proper easements. Before we continue, are you going to be able to get the easements? Will the owners of the property grant them?
I think we've mentioned to them that it would be necessary to have some sort of agreement to go onto their property. Obviously, we can't build anything if they wouldn't grant the easement, but they're here tonight, so we can ask them both tonight if you'd like.
Okay. I'm sure we'll get that answer tonight. So I'd rather have them speak tonight due to the fact that staff is going to look into some info on this already. So I'm going to let the people speak tonight. And then that will give us a little more idea what staff needs to look into further down the line here, make sure we got our. So Val, I believe you wanted to speak. If you care, go to the podium, give your addresses and name.
I'm Valerie Schiller, and I do live at 359 North Cedar. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes and clarify some of the discussion that was going on about the property. We built the home, my husband and I, so we were the general contractors. There was a double lot. There were two homes on, not 353, but it would be 359, and I believe my neighbor, which is 361, so it would be to the north of me, that home. There was a very old home in between. It was just in the center of what is now two lots. That home was torn down, and Rudy Blazek was building the one home at 361. I think that's the address there, wasn't that? Okay, and then we bought the lot from him to build the home. There was no variance on the actual home itself, although we built, a pretty decent-sized home there, but there was no variance to build a larger home. We just built what we could, as large as we could, obviously. The only variance that was made was for the driveway, and we came to the meetings to ask for that, and it was approved by the council. When we were getting ready to move in, we had the land and we were getting ready to sod it, and then they came in and said, no, 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 this is way too flat. You need to have a swale. So we paid D.W. Nelson, I believe it was $2,000 or $3,000 to redo our entire backyard to meet the specs of the city so we can get permission to move in. I don't know if you remember that or not, John. So we did, actually, we had a flat level, yard, and then they came in and said, no, you need to put the swale in. So we had D.W. Nelson come in, and I can find those receipts. It was either $2,000 or $3,000 for him to bring his machines there and build a swale. So that I do remember. So I just wanted to clarify it so it could be fresh in your minds. We never compromised that swale to date. The sanitary sewer, as soon as we moved in, would overflow in my laundry room and in my bathroom. I would tell Joe from Reliable Plumbing, and he came out and checked it a lot. Finally, I met up with Craig Wright, who was what Dave does now. And I don't know, John, I thought at the time it was Schlag and Sedek. Does that sound like other engineers too? Schlag and Sedek? Yeah, I think those were the people. I don't remember Bennis, but I could be wrong. I have a lot of that information still. I know that they had to come out originally to check out the land and make sure we can build on it. So I don't know if we paid them to do that. Maybe you guys had Bennis. I don't remember. Anyway, we did what we were supposed to do, and that property has always had this water problem for 10 years. Craig Wright, I dealt with him, and he finally put on the north side a pipe from that stormwater sewer to the front of the house. That seemed to help maybe in 2 or 3 inch rainfalls, but once we got those 4 inch rainfalls, it did not help. Then we had a drought for a few years, and it was a wonderful thing because I was able to sleep at night. And now in the last however many years Dave Graff has been around and hearing my name, got all their cell phones. It's not pleasant. It's a horrible way to live every time it rains. Sanitary water in my home on one floor and storm water in my basement. My home on this one side is cracking. That's the only part of the home that has cracks in it. No other parts have cracks in it except where the water flows. And I so appreciate what you guys have done putting that gauge valve in just recently. However, I don't believe that's going to stop that water from coming in my yard and compromising my home and its structure and my well-being at this point, because it is not a good way to live every time it rains. So I just wanted to clarify, the situation on the home, because I was the builder. So, but we met all the specs that Wooddale asked, and we never compromised any of it. So hopefully we can get that fixed. And I've lived in Wooddale my whole life, and I'm going to stay a while, but it's a tough way to live. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Yes.
I'd like to ask you, Mrs. Schiller, the same question I asked Dave Graff and his group. Will you and your husband sign an easement if that's necessary to remedy the problem?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Biara Jablońska. I'm from 353 North Cedar. First, I would like to thank all of you for making the decision to let the engineers measure and make 3 plans on my property to stop the flooding. On the last meeting, you were talking about the cost of the project, and you said it costs too much for only 2 houses. But you know that the water is coming from all around the neighbors' houses and is floating to our property because we are the lowest house than the other houses. So that is the reason why we have a lot of water. There are already drain pipes to take the water, but the pipes are too small to handle the water amount. This problem is not new for you and has been talked about for a long time, and there was no new decision made. If you think the project was too expensive, why you not want to use the other two projects and choose one not expensive but still stop the water coming to our house? Please help me fix the problem on my property. I count on your positive votes in making a good decision in solving my problems. Please choose one of the three projects that the engineers have made. We do not need the most expensive project. We just need the project that can stop the flooding on our property. Thank you for your listening. Like I say, I living in 353 North Cedar. If you can see the pictures 2B, for our best situation will be get this pipe going on the south side because the water is coming from this side all over the houses above us, going between me and Danny, that my neighbor on south side, and between me and Valeria. So I am on the most danger parts on both sides.
Mr.
Thank you.
Littleton,
Excuse me?
are you done?
Yes.
Okay.
Your name is,
Jabloński,
how do you spell that?
Jablonski.
Okay, my question to you is the same one that I asked as Mr. and Mrs. Schiller. Will Mr. and Mrs.
Jabloński.
Jablonski?
Jabloński, J-A-B.
J-A-B, Jablonski?
Yes.
Will you sign easements granting the city easements on your property?
Yes.
Okay. Let it be recorded that both parties on the properties in question have said in public that they will sign easements with the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussions on this? If not, I'm going to make a recommendation. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
Don't get me wrong on this. We got the engineering on this now. We looked through it. This has not gone to stormwater. Isn't it practice that it goes to stormwater first and then comes to us? Could someone answer that?
Mr. Cadala?
Stormwater is a specially appointed committee by the mayor, so I'd ask that Mayor Johnson correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the purpose of the Stormwater Committee was to be a recommendation committee to bring problems to light, to offer some possible solutions, but it's still the council's responsibility to work with staff, pursue engineering possibilities, and decide whether or not we're going to move forward. So in my opinion, I think we're beyond what the Stormwater Committee would typically do for us. I'm not saying I want to omit them from the process, but I think we're already where they would leave off, I think.
That doesn't answer my question, but
If I can just mention, with the February Stormwater Commission meeting was canceled, and the January meeting was moved back to the first week of January, and the next one will be in March. So we did have this, gap in time without a Stormwater Commission meeting. I've kept them informed on the progress of these studies, and in their next meeting with them, we'll give them the full report. But unfortunately, the timing of when council was acting on the CIP and when the Stormwater Commission meetings wasn't quite in sync. So that's, I think, why the full report is coming to you before them.
Alderman Joe Coles?
I realize that something has to be done, but I think before we actually vote on it, now, I would like to have it done, but I think it should be looked up and see before we decide on this, what we should pick, is you look at the plans that you're supposed to go back 10 years ago. I believe it should be done. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going against you. It's just that I think the plan should be looked at first and see what has been done, how the house was built and how much property there is involved where the house has been, and then we could decide. That would only shouldn't take no more than one more meeting. As long as the snow's on the ground, we're not gonna have any rain. I hope not, anyway. if we have rain, we're gonna be in trouble. But, that's what I would suggest now. It's up to
Okay,
the committee.
sounds good. Any other questions on that? All right. I have to go with what Joe pretty much summed up here. I am going to ask staff to go back and pull out the file and then share it with the engineer firm that did the study, and then come back with those findings, and then we'll make our decision based on those findings on which direction to go. I agree we need to look at this. The more difficult, there's some stuff that came out of some of these council members that we need to look at before we make a commitment to it. Mr. Cadala.
Can I add to that, if the motioner and the seconder agree, that we also ask the city attorney to review the statute of limitations process on the possibility that there might have been a engineering consulting snafu here? You know, if we're going to ultimately approve this, possibility of getting any of this money back if there was a technical mistake made sure would be nice.
Okay, I will add that to my motion. Alderman Roy side. Alderman Roy Wesley. Roy Wesley.
I don't think I was that old yet. I might be. We have alternative A, B, and C of all different dollar amounts. Do we have this in the budget for this coming year?
As it sits right now, this is in the capital improvement plan, but it's in the unfunded category, which
Another one.
means it's kind of sitting out there and it's not, I guess the short answer, it's not in the CIP for next year as it currently sits there, but if you all decide to do this, then we can add it to it. But as it sits right now, it's not programmed in.
Is it? Am I going? Okay. Is it improper to pick alternative, to give direction to staff on an alternative that we like?
I think after my opinion is if we come back and with their findings, they will come back with a suggestion of what alternative they suggest that we would do.
Okay,
After they do all their findings,
okay.
I would assume that you are going to come back with that?
We'll come back with that. And as we said before, our preferred alternative is alternate 2B, but the other, and, we have reasons for preferring that one, but the other alternatives will also be effective in remedying the problem, so they could be done as well. And we can maybe write up a chart, when we bring this back to you, maybe write up a chart of the pros and cons of each alternate, and then we can discuss it further.
I would like that, thank you.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor, there's a second. To have staff allow to get all the info. I believe John will back to committee, will we have it by then? I know you won't have it by council. Committee. My other question to the city manager. By taking this back to answer those questions and coming back to with the recommendation, which direction we will go, how does that affect the CIP project? Could we have passed the CIP project and then add this in down the line?
You can do that. The programming of capital improvements is a two-step process. The first thing is the passage of the 5-year CIP, which essentially is a planning document, and when you pass that, that gives us the authorization to put the projects that are scheduled for 2011 into the budget, which you'll then actually appropriate money for. There, as I mentioned the last time we talked about this, there's enough money in the capital project fund to include this project as an amendment down the line. So this should not have any impact on your ability to pass the CIP.
Okay.
I would recommend you go ahead and pass the CIP so we can keep going with the budget process.
Right.
You can always add it later on.
Right. We could add any of these projects, am I correct? Or this one right
There's an
now?
old saying that
Okay,
says
got
you
it.
can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want.
Okay.
I don't think there's enough money in there to handle all 4 projects.
Well, the one of the studies is slated in 2011, 2012 street project, so that will fall under that.
I think, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. You can probably squeeze 3 of the 4 projects in the next 4 years.
Okay.
I'm not sure you can squeeze all 4 in.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Johnson?
Question to URS. Is this additional review covered in your original quote?
We'll definitely take care of it with our original quote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's a motion on the floor, there's a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one. Okay, so 2 weeks. All right, the other item is, oh, here's another one for you. The Windsor-Catalpa intersection flooding study. Go ahead.
Do you want me to give just a brief introduction on this one? And again, and actually URS was under the same contract to look at both of these drainage problems. This is flooding occurs at the intersection of Windsor and Catalpa during heavy rains. URS studied the watershed and looked at what alternates there would be to alleviate the problem. Basically, what they came up with is to correct that problem, you need to lower that detention basin that's at the